Item 5, overview and update on the Neighborhood Emergency Response Team. Captain Brandon Tom to provide an update and overview of NERT.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, we're very privileged to be able to have our NERT coordinator, Captain Brandon Tom, here with members of his advisory board as well. And at this particular point, to give us an update in terms of what's going on with some remarks, hopefully, from some of the advisory members as well. At your pleasure, Captain Tom.
Good evening, President Nakajo, Vice President Morgan, Commissioner Feinstein, Commissioner Frazier, Commissioner Collins, Chief Nicholson, Secretary Maureen, and the command staff. I am Brandon Tom, and I am the NERT's Program Coordinator. Thank you for the invitation to speak about the Neighborhood Emergency Response Team, or NERT. I want to personally thank Chief Nicholson and Chief Arturos Brown for the opportunity to be in this position. I have the privilege to be a member of the San Francisco Fire Department for the past 25 years. It's unbelievable how fast that time flies. I am a native San Franciscan, and I've worked at all 44 firehouses in the city. I became a NERT instructor in 2002, and it has been very fulfilling to empower my fellow San Franciscans with the knowledge and training we provide. I was a student at Lowell High School and had just left football practice when the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake hit. This event led to the genesis of the NERT's program. The Marina District was the hardest hit. It suffered major damage from fires and building collapse. Spontaneous volunteers helped to run fire hose from the fireboat to the PWSS because many fire hydrants had no water. In 1990, citizens from the Marina District persuaded this fire department under Chief Postel to start a pilot training program. The fire department began to expand the program to everyone who lives or works in the city. Since the first NERT class was 24 in 1990, we have trained close to 35,000 citizens. The goal of NERT training is to provide education on preparing for a disaster and the skills to help their neighborhood and the fire department in a disaster. Preparing for a disaster is essential to surviving a disaster. The NERT program was adapted from a community emergency response training program from LAFD. In 1993, the CERTS program became nationally recognized by FEMA. So our NERT program is the same as CERTS nationwide. We have kept the name NERTS not only because we were the first programs, but because as San Franciscans, we identify by the neighborhoods we represent and ultimately the neighbors that we help. Neighbors helping neighbors is the building block for a strong city. The fire department has even implemented plans for NERT trained volunteers into a disaster plan for the whole city, citywide. So NERT has two main models. Number one, do the most good for the most people. Number two, NERTs don't get hurt. We practice this at our citywide drills that we have twice a year. We have one in April to commemorate the 1906 earthquake, and we have one in October to commemorate the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Now I want to introduce the members of the NERT Advisory Board. The NERT Advisory Board is made up of volunteers who have gone through the NERT training. The Advisory Board provides oversight and guidance to the NERT program and its volunteers to ensure best practices, safety requirements, and organizational goals are met and upheld. They are Board President Gary Pegueros, Secretary Maxine Fasulis, Board Members Lisa Dunmeyer, Chris Pedregal Martin, Rebecca Liebersbach, Linda Ingram, Nathan Karkowski, and Steiger. I now invite NOPA Neighborhood Coordinator Nathan Karkowski to continue the presentation.
Thank you very much, Captain Tom. Good evening, President Nakajo. Thank you for inviting NERT to present this evening. Fire commissioners, seeing so many new smiles on the commission is really quite great. Chief Nicholson, always a pleasure seeing you. My name is Nathan Karkowski, and I've been a member of the NERT program for 14 years. Captain Tom mentioned the two legs of our program, or our mission, and I get to dive a little deeper into those. The first leg is personal preparedness. So we're ready to help our neighbors. To make this leg a reality, we take 20 plus hours of FEMA standardized all hazard training. This training helps the citizen volunteers be prepared at home for earthquakes, tsunamis, fires, tornadoes. I think you get where I'm going with that. So we can better support the fire department. This basic training also details things like the incident command system and some of the basics like how to turn off gas or water if we do have leaks in an event of a disaster. The San Francisco Fire Department also offers NERT community volunteers advanced training so we can diversify the way we help our community, such as Stop the Bleed classes, American Heart Association CPR and AED training, along with going back to our roots and teaching us how to assist the fire reserve in setting up the auxiliary water supply above ground hydrant system. Leg 2, whole community preparedness. With this, we provide outreach to bring the message of disaster preparedness to all the citizens we can reach in this great city. This summer, NERT volunteers will be attending several neighborhood fairs and all Sunday streets to get the word out and invite our neighbors to join this family. For the benefit of some of our newer commissioners, I'm going to turn back the clock a few years, back to 2017. Labor Day weekend, the city experienced an extreme heat event that can harm the elderly and other vulnerable populations. On a Friday night, we received a text message from Chief Brown asking for volunteers to staff cooling centers for these vulnerable neighbors. And by Saturday morning, we had teams deployed to these cooling centers that the city had stood up. We've had several NorCal fire events in the last few years, and once again, NERT was called on to help. We deployed team members to shelters and to staff donation centers. Then in 2020, the world changed when COVID-19 reared its ugly head. And the city needed more people power. Who are you going to call? San Francisco Fire Department's Neighborhood Emergency Response Team. In the early stages, we helped the city hand out flyers at Warrior games and transit hubs within the city. Then, as we all sheltered in place, we walked hundreds of blocks, literally taping information door by door to help our neighbors. As the impacts of COVID-19 grew, we then assisted at testing centers and staffing drive-through food banks once again to help our neighbors in a time of need. Yay, the vaccine arrived. Once again, NERT was called on to staff sites to free up the medical staff to then provide those vaccinations in arms. Another illustration of NERT volunteers being that force multiplier, 8 NERTs were even honored to help out in the city's EOC COVID Command Center at the Moscone Center. NERT logged tens of thousands of hours, I should say FEMA reimbursable hours, more specifically, supporting our neighbors. Thank you, volunteers. On the last slide, I mentioned how NERT's a force multiplier for the city. For the benefit of let's do some math. Every day, there are 350 firefighters on duty responding to the needs of the city. Depending on who you talk to, San Francisco has a population of about 750,000 people. That creates a ratio of 1 firefighter to every 2,150 citizens, which on a regular daily basis meets our needs. In a disaster, this ratio does not work. And that's where NERT becomes a force multiplier. Growing the family of NERTs is a challenge we now face. Another challenge we face is a population in flux. NERTs who experienced the '89 earthquake are retiring from the program. Over the last few years, we can look around and see our city is changing. And NERT needs to find new ways and different ways to engage this different and younger and more diverse demographic. And changes like this do not happen in a vacuum. It takes human capital. Lastly, we look at the challenge of serving the whole community. We need to build our program out to support the diverse languages of our community. We have growing vulnerable populations who need different support. And when we look at these new challenges we as a community face, such as the public safety power shutoffs, the need for our volunteer services grow. For example, we're working with the Department of Public Health to figure out ways to support vulnerable populations who need electricity for life-saving medical equipment. Developing ways to serve these vulnerable communities takes time and human capital. I invite my fellow advisory board member Steiger to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you, President Nakajo, Vice President Morgan, Commissioners Feinstein, Frazier, Collins, Chief Nicholson, Chiefs and Command Staff. My name is Steiger. I've been a NERT since shortly after moving to San Francisco in 2012. I was honored to be a member of the fire family working out of the NERT office as the county's disaster volunteer coordinator from the years of 2015 to 2021. And immediately after leaving the office, I was invited to join the advisory committee of the NERT, so I get to remain involved. We've had these challenges for the duration of the NERT program, and our program has just constantly attracted world-class talent. Some of the previous members in my position have gone on to leadership positions elsewhere in the city in the departments of human resources and emergency management and public health. We know the quality of our staff is incredible. Throughout all 30 years of the program, we've had very dedicated program coordinators. Chief Erica Ortiz Brown took this program to heights unseen before. We're really peerless across other CERT teams in the country. We've been recognized at state, federal, and international levels. We did some additional math. Thanks to Nathan, we calculated using both those FEMA reimbursable dollars and some other measures. We estimate that approximately every $1 spent on the NERT program is equivalent to $15 spent in our just resilience across the city. So our enduring ask now and always has been for staff support. This is really for you, the fire department, as we are right now with our staff, which has frequently been a staff of 1 in the office for the duration of the program, 2 when we've been lucky, including now. We've been able to focus on training those 35,000 volunteers. Each of those volunteers who receives that training is ideally one less victim in a disaster such as an earthquake, And in our best case scenario, they're those force multipliers who can really support the fire departments. We teach them to speak the language of suppression. They understand battalion control. They know how to slot into the response structure of the department when they're needed. What we really haven't been able to focus on with our current staffing level is anything beyond training. So once they graduate from our NERT program, the ones who are really into it come back and are so dedicated, but we don't have the bandwidth to continue, like with retention, with training, with retraining our perishable skills. When we certify a NERT, that certification is good for 2 years, and we ask them to come back to refresh those skills either at our drills or by taking the training again. But without being able to focus on anything beyond that initial training, we're really missing an opportunity to support the fire department and to make us more resilient than we are. We have questions or
Thank you, Steiger. I'm here to answer. May I answer any questions that you may have?
Thank you very much, Captain Tom. Thank you very much for your presentation and all of your attendance and support. At this point, we'll ask for public comment on this item. Madam Secretary.
I don't see anybody approaching the podium, and there is nobody on our public comment line.
All right, public comment is closed. I'll take any questions or comment from the commissioners. Chief Nicholson, would you like to give a few remarks?
Yes, thank you, President Nakajo. Thank you so much, Brandon and team. I appreciate you all so much. NERT is extremely important, and they do really good work. I was a NERT trainer as well for a few years, and that's how I got to know some of the team. We have struggled with staffing and retention, I do understand that is an issue, and we can certainly take this offline and discuss it further with you, Captain Brandon Tom. All right, brother. But I want to say thank you to our NERT folks for all that you do. This is voluntary, and it really shows your character and how much you care, and so I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Chief Nicholson. At this point, is there any commissioners? Commissioner Fraser, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was wonderful to hear. Really, congratulations on this whole program. NERTs, one and all.
It has been earmarked from the fire department budget. It's very, very small percentage, less than 0.1%.
I can understand. No, I just was curious when you said you were looking for more budget, that's something that you take up with the fire department. I thought maybe it was elsewhere, but that helps me understand, so that's good. No, I agree. I've been to several NERT events, and there was a fledgling NERT in my neighborhood. I'm not sure where it went, but I'm going to find out. And, but I really appreciate your presentation and all the work that you do. It's an important piece of the whole thing of keeping our city safe.
Thank you, Commissioner Fraser. Vice President Morgan.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you guys for your report, and thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it. And thank you guys for the selfless work that you guys do. Can you guys hear me? My mic? Yeah. I got a loud voice. Yeah, and hopefully the budget didn't affect you guys, and you guys did okay. Thanks to Mr. Corso. Yeah. And you guys have survived. How many active members do you guys have?
So I would say about 10,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
10,000?
Yeah.
That's pretty.
But that's a small number. Our goal, or the goal that I have, is that we get up to 40,000 active. It's going to take a long time.
That would help the multiplier that you mentioned
Yes.
earlier.
Yes.
That's
That's
great.
only 5% of our city.
Mhm.
That's not much, but that
Mhm.
studies have shown that would be the most impactful.
Yeah, everybody grab a bucket, right?
Pretty much.
That
yes.
water going.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you guys coming tonight. Thank you for your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Morgan. Commissioner Collins?
Excellent report. I'm learning about NERT from you. Are there some parts of the city that are better covered than others?
So that's a big question because there are, depending on the neighborhood, some are more active than others.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also due to population changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very loaded question. I would love all of the city to be equal, but there are some
Mm-hmm.
that have better taken care of themselves than others.
And so people tend to work in their own neighborhoods. Is that right?
The goal is that you respond in your neighborhood,
Right.
but that's not necessarily the case,
Mhm.
but that's the goal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's incredible that a volunteer effort, 10,000 sounds not enough. It also sounds enormous. So
Right.
well done.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. At this point, Commissioner Feinstein?
Sorry. Thank you, President Nataggio. I just really wanted to commend you. And people that volunteer give up themselves. They give up their time. They give up their expertise. They give whatever it is they have to give. And I hold you in tremendous regard because you volunteer, and come out and do the training events, either teach or participate or whatever it is that you're doing, makes a huge difference. My question, and I think it was referenced in here, is how do you deal with language differences? Because I can't remember where it was I read how many different languages are spoken by citizens in San Francisco, but I remember being astounded by the number. And how do you handle that situation in terms of you're gonna get the volunteers you're able to recruit, and then you're going to have people who would benefit from the service and probably really like to be volunteers, but may have a communication barrier. What's your strategy to try to address that issue?
So in the past, we have bilingual firefighters do the instructions. So we have Spanish speakers, we have Cantonese speakers, we have Mandarin speakers go out into the community and conduct the classes. However, that number of people who are bilingual is dwindling. The only thing that we do now is we have everything printed in different languages. However, so I do want to address that that communication barrier is an issue, and I would love a better way to solve it. Technology is probably a way that we are leaning towards. There are programs where we can probably speak into a mic and it will translate it onto the screen. That's the next step that I'm thinking about, but we don't have the capacity to do that yet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Feinstein. I just want to make a few remarks, but like the colleagues in terms of our fire commissioners who are volunteers, the subject matter of volunteers is so important and so highly regarded in terms of not only volunteering, the amount of time and years that you've done that. I can't help but drift back to Loma Prieta, back when I'm sitting there at Candlestick Park watching the A's play the Giants, and the seat that I was sitting on, I believe I was standing up, and I didn't realize that was the chair being the movement of the earthquake. Grabbed my son and ran out of that stadium.
Smart.
The only way that I could have gotten home is that if the citizens of San Francisco weren't out on the streets directing traffic. And I never forgot that because that kind of public service, and we've talked a lot recently about public service or the generation out there, but it's the public service and the volunteers who are out there in San Francisco that got me an opportunity to go home. And I saw that same spirit with the concepts in terms of NERT and the development and the build of NERT. Chief Ostero Brown is back there as well, and the time and the commitment within that. You, Chief Tong, as you pick up that assignment. I'm curious as the population differentiation that's occurring now with the economic climate, with a question that Commissioner Feinstein asked about language, and the bottom line is trying to recruit more members of NERD.
Right.
And the generation changes, meaning that when no that happened to now, that generation, my generation, we're quite older, and I'm kind of curious as to how we can reach out to the younger generations that make up San Francisco, because we had a discussion the other day when Tom O'Connor was here from City about my question about the young folks out there or the members who are interested in public service, whether you want to be a police officer, a firefighter, a medic, and NERD is right there to me as part of that. I can't imagine the next crisis or catastrophe we have if we don't have NERD folks out there. And we all know that. So in San Francisco, if you know that and you understand it, you always got this little edge going on that one day, again, we don't want it ever to happen, but as a matter of time, what was it, Chief? It's going to happen, or the preparation for us to deal with it when it comes. So I just wanted to say that, and I want to say how much I appreciate NERD, the advisory, and all that you do, and whatever this commission can do to try to work to recruit Captain Tom. And again, I think this past weekend, 3 weeks, I've been in Japantown doing community festivals, and I was surrounded by young, energetic men and women who want to be part of this department, Chief. And that public service spirit is what motivated me as well. So thank you so much for coming and giving us an update with this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary.
Item 6,